And you know what? It's about time I get back to work. I really haven't made much progress on the boat over the last 2 or 3 months for a variety of reasons, but I'm hoping to get back at it today. The main task at hand is going to be finishing to fair in the frames, keel batten, chine log, and the stem so that I can make patterns and put the bottoms and the sides on the boat. Fairing in the frames, chine log, and keel batten aft of the stem is a relatively simple procedure. Basically what we're going to do, we're going to take a straight edge and we're going to run it along, and ideally we want the straight edge to make a straight line from the outside corner of this chine log up to this corner that we've cut on the keel batten. It should have nice contact along the whole route. As we slide it down, anywhere it hangs up, we're going to trim down with hand planes and chisels until we can move it across and not have it hang up on any of the frames. We'll do the same thing on the outside here. You can see because the frames are cut square, this aft edge sticks out beyond this plane. So we'll just use hand planes and chisels to trim that down until we can slide this straight edge the full length of the boat without it hanging up. Up here at the front of the boat, the procedure is pretty much the same. We're going to use our straight edge to fair in the chine log, stem, and frames. But because of the drastic curve, we're going to have to remove a lot more material. We have our reference line drawn on the chine log where we want that outside corner to be, as well as a reference line drawn on the stem where the side is going to meet the bottom of the boat. You can see here this part of the keel batten is a lot of excess material, so we're going to make a diagonal cut to remove that, because it's a lot easier to remove that material with a saw than hand planing it all. After that, again, we're just going to use the straight edge and hand plane it in until we have a nice fair surface to attach to the bottom of the boat. Up here at the stem, we also have a lot of excess material to remove. Remember, we drew some offset lines up here that are going to represent where the bottom and sides of the boat meet the stem. So what I'll do is I'll use some battens around the side of the boat as well as the straight edge to judge where I need to remove and plane off that excess material to get those battens to line up with that offset line that we drew down the center of the stem. I have the keel batten and the chine log faired in at the transom. Now I'm going to come up and fair in this frame, and then I'll finish the keel batten in between the frames. I can take my saw and line it up parallel with this frame and gently saw into the keel batten until the saw blades just touch the top of this frame. That lets me know how much material I need to take off the keel batten at that point. So you can see, because we cut this bevel on the table saw, we don't have to remove very much material at this point. We'll need to remove a little bit more off the aft side to fair it in with where we faired it in at the transom. To fair in this frame, I'm letting the back side of my plane rest on the chine log, which sets the angle, and then I just start with the blade just inside of the chine log and run it up the frame, and that's going to bevel the frame to match the chine log here. Up at the keel batten, I can do the same thing and let the front of the plane ride on the keel batten, and that's going to set the angle for the frame up by the keel. It might be hard to see, but I really haven't removed any material off the forward side of this frame, because that's what we cut our dimensions to. All the material I've been removing has been coming off the aft edge of this frame, and it's just to fair it in with the chine log and then finish fairing in the keel batten here. Now that I have the keel batten faired in up here at this frame and back at the transom, I can come in and even it out between the frame and the transom. And of course, we'll check our work with the straight edge. I'm still hanging up ever so slightly right here, and right here. So I'll just plane a little bit more off there. Pretty happy with the fit there for now. I'll continue on down the boat and get the rest of the frames, and then we'll come back and triple check it. That looks good. Now that I'm forward of a midship, the material I'm going to be trimming off the frames is going to be off the front, because the back side of the frame is what we cut to our final dimensions. I've actually accomplished quite a bit of work on the boat since that last scene, but unfortunately due to the holiday breaks, a work trip that had me out of town for over a month, and losing a bunch of camera footage, I'm going to have to catch you up with where I'm at. Most of the different processes that I've had to accomplish that I don't have camera footage of, I will be repeating on other parts of the boat, so don't worry, you'll still be able to see how I've accomplished most of these tasks. When I left off, I was fairing in the frames of the boat, the keel batten, as well as the chine logs and shear clamps. I finished fairing those in with hand planes and draw knives. Then I moved here to the stem of the boat and faired that in. On that I used a draw knife, hand planes, and an electric planer. After getting everything faired in, it's time to make patterns for the sides of the boat. To do that, I went to a big box store and got this paper floor underlayment material. I rolled it out down the side of the boat, stapled it in place, and then used a utility knife to cut it flush with the top of the chine log and then with a shear clamp. That gave me a nice pattern for the side of the boat, which I then removed all the staples. Once I detached the patterns from the sides of the boat, I was able to measure them to get a good length. They're just over 16 feet long, and since the plywood that I ordered is 8-foot lengths, I needed to splice them together to get a solid panel that would cover the full length of the side. So I've got two 8-foot sheets of plywood with about a 2-foot section spliced in the middle. To cut the scarf joints on the sheets, I built a framework above the boat to support them because I'm running out of shop space, and laid 3 panels up on top of each other. I offset the ends of the panels by the length of the scarf joint, and then used a hand plane and power plane to cut the angles. Once that was all cut, I laid out the joints, mixed up epoxy, and clamped them together. Once the epoxy cured on the scarf joints, I was able to lay out the side patterns on the plywood, and then I cut them out with a circular saw. Once I had the plywood side panels roughed out, I clamped them in place and used hand planes to fit them to their final dimensions. Then I removed the plywood panels from the sides, mixed up epoxy, and secured them in place. This starboard side panel has been curing for 24 hours, so what we're going to do, we're going to pull all the clamps off, remove the screws, take the cardboard pattern off, and this side panel should be done. Then we're going to glue up and install the port side panel. That's always nice when you take the clamps off and this doesn't come springing back. Looks like the epoxy is cured up and held very nice even with this twist in the board. The port side panel is all prepped and ready to install. The purpose of these screws with fender washers is to help me align and secure the side panel in the proper position and then get clamps on it. The fender washers distribute the force from the screw head across the panel so that it doesn't get dented and to prevent the screw head from digging too far into the panel. There will be some small holes left in the boards, but those will get plugged and filled when I finish the exterior of the boat. I've got all the clamps pre-positioned, at least within arm's reach, and ready to go. Now it's time to mix epoxy. Here's the port side panel installed and ready to cure. Used pretty much every clamp in the shop, and I had to add some extra screws at the transom to get a good snug fit. I'll let it cure for 24 hours and then we'll remove the clamps and pattern. Well, the epoxy's been curing for a couple of days, so now it's time to remove all the clamps. Now that I have all the clamps and clamping screws removed, as well as the cardboard pattern, I can go ahead and clean up these epoxy joints with a hand plane. Once I have all those joints cleaned up, I'll be ready to make patterns for the bottom panels. I used a hand plane to clean up the excess epoxy where the bottom panel overlaps the side panel near the back of the boat. 10 inches forward of station 2, the bottom panel miters up against the side panel. To clean out that joint, I used a card scraper and a hand chisel. Once I had all those joints cleaned up, I came up to the stem of the boat and trimmed off the excess panel with a hand plane and got it all nice and smooth. This joint's going to be covered up by a stem cap near completion of the boat. That's probably either going to be a piece of mahogany or maybe even black walnut for an accent piece. With all that work done, now I can go ahead and make cardboard patterns for the bottom panels of the boat. Now that I have the port bottom panel pattern made, I need to go to the store to get some more cardboard to make the pattern for the starboard side. I'm not going to show making the starboard side pattern because it's the exact same process as the port. That's where I'm going to wrap up today's video. In the next video, I'll show how to scarf together sheets of plywood to get lengths that are longer than sheets that you might have available to buy. We'll also show how to cut out the bottom panels and then install them. I might even start working on the dagger board trunk. Anyways, thanks for watching Make Stuff Nation. I hope you found this video entertaining and useful. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.